First, last November, people in remote Aboriginal communities got a shock warning from the West Australian government. You might have to move. The government announced it would stop providing services to as many as 150 remote communities, possibly forcing them to close.
I don't think they provide viability, and I don't think they provide any opportunity for employment and for people to have a good education and good health.
When the Prime Minister was asked about the issue on regional radio, his answer was blunt.
What we can't do is endlessly subsidise lifestyle choices if those lifestyle choices are not conducive to the kind of full participation in Australian society that everyone should have.
But last week, WA's Aboriginal Affairs Minister said the problem wasn't a lack of money, but making sure it's well spent. Facing a public backlash, Premier Colin Barnett began talking about the social problems facing remote communities.
How can we ensure that boys and girls go to school? How can we ensure that they are safe? How can we reduce alcohol and drug usage? And I will be failing you as the Premier of this state if I ignore those issues.
Well, after that, the Premier went back into Parliament and spoke about 39 cases of gonorrhea among Aboriginal children aged between 10 and 14 in WA without naming their locations. And the state's police commissioner weighed in too.
There are young girls there that are being abused on a daily basis, and I, as Police Commissioner, cannot provide the level of service that you would expect in those communities. It is simply not practical.
So people in remote communities are being left to wonder whether they'll be the ones who have to move. And they're fighting hard now to survive. Ginny Stein went to the Kimberley in the state's far north to film this report.
Out here, good news travels fast, but bad news moves even faster.
She's a special person. She is always on Facebook, texting everybody.
For the past few months, since the government announced the closure of 150 remote Aboriginal communities, the people of Wangkatjungka have been kicking up a social media storm.
We knew that all our family were on Facebook, so what we did, we just set the page up, and other communities started to jump on the Facebook and started realising what the government's going to do to us.
I wanted to go into the ears of Tony Abbott. That's where I wanted to go. And all those other government officials, because I've just been watching the news about all the tax breaks that all these big corporations are getting, and he says that the taxpayer can no longer afford to fund Aboriginal people, fund their lifestyle choice. I mean, wake up.
It's from here, with the help of her family, that Langali Bayanduri and her brother Nelson got the message going. Protests spread first locally, then nationally, and now worldwide. Throughout the Kimberley, the threat to close more than 100 remote Aboriginal communities has raised both fear and anger. At Wangkatjungka, on the edge of the Great Sandy Desert, there is disbelief that the next wave in a long line of dispossession may be soon to hit.
It feels like everything is sort of going backwards, more or less. Nothing's moving forward, and it's happened to past generation is now happening to the future generation.
Community matriarch Olive Knight is no stranger to the world stage. Her talents as a blues singer are recognised internationally. She sung alongside Hugh Jackman on Broadway, but Wangkatjungka is home.
Wangkatjungka will never ever be a lifestyle choice. Never. It is my home where I'm deeply rooted in. I've actually grown up here all my life. My teenage years, my childhood years were spent here.
Wangkatjungka is one of the larger outstations with a permanent population of about 200. Established in 1975, its title was carved out from neighbouring Christmas Creek cattle station.
Well, the people were rounded up and taken off their traditional lands out in the Great Sandy Desert. Most of them were put to work on this cattle station here.
It owes its existence today to federal support in the 70s and 80s for the outstation movement.
The reason why many leaders chose to get back on country as soon as they could, particularly in the 1970s and the 1980s, was because it was much safer than being in town. It was because they could use whatever value system and whatever governance structures and education structures that they had to ensure that their children were safe.
Yeah. Okay.
The culture is kind of like a history from elder people who passed away 1,000 years ago, you know. It's great to be out in the bush, like for children's future, like they can carry it on and all those sort of things.
So this is a garbage tree. It's a bush fruit of ours, very high in vitamin C.
In November, when the West Australian government first announced it wanted to close communities, it blamed cuts to federal funding. Last month, Premier Barnett raised the spectre of child abuse and high rates of sexually transmitted infections to justify moves to close communities.
They've certainly raised the child abuse in communities. They've certainly raised the STIs, but that's not a justifiable reason to close communities.
Is it an issue?
It is an issue, and I'm not saying it's not. It certainly is an issue. But that's not the reasons why he's come out and said he's closing the communities. He's come out to say he's closing the communities because he doesn't believe he has got enough money to pay for the municipals.
Vicky O'Donnell has spent decades working in Aboriginal health in the Kimberley. She has accused the government of using dirty tactics to justify community closures, including allegations that children are being prescribed the contraceptive Implanon.
So now they're saying that it's not uncommon for 11 and 12-year-olds to be running around the Kimberley with Implanons in their arms, which was a statement that was put into The Age a couple of weeks ago. That's not true.
My biggest fear is for my people. You know, we've had a history of basically, you know, being removed off the land, you know, again with no consultation, no involvement, and I just ask in 2015, how can this happen in Australia?
At Wangkatjungka, at a time when the community is fearing for its existence, there is a mini housing boom going on. State government housing has kept a commitment to build 15 new homes. Here, government funds the school and provides municipal services such as power and water and a medical clinic. The government's intentions are being questioned.
We're always thinking about what other motives the government has about building all these houses on there. Are they building all these houses down so they can shut down the outstations and get those people up and move them onto these larger communities?
They look like the back leg look like a kangaroo leg.
But you know it, it's definitely bilby.
It's a bilby, this one, yeah.
Claude Carter lives about 20 kilometres away from Wangkatjungka with his extended family at one of the more vulnerable tiny outstations.
And mainly the main camp is down here, if we want to have a look down there. Mainly here the track goes in. Once you come out, they always use a two-side track, one on the right-hand side and one on the left-hand side. They'll always come out. And my grandson acting like a bilby.
At his home, known locally as The Block, he's built much of what's here himself by selling his art. Current government support is limited to power and water and phone and internet access.
I get a little bit diesel side, and maybe if I want to do a landscaping project, I can get a little bit money of that one.
If the government cuts services, he says he won't be moving.
I can't move. If government want me to move, I still can't move. I got grandkids now. I'm a grandfather. From my daughter's side. Yeah, and them kids call it home too. I can't really move. It's home sweet home for my place. Yeah.